USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Friday the 13th, January 13th, 2023. Each week we handicap and prognosticate some games at the weekend. Our podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. I don't know if it's because we have a lot of parity or it's late in the season or what, but it sounds like the odds makers just flipped a coin and said, well, I don't know on some of these games as we're looking at them. But why don't we dive in? There's some interesting matchups, even if the odds makers can't make heads or tails of what's going on. And the first one on the list, gentlemen, is Ohio State, a plus 135 at Michigan, minus 165. Not a huge favorite there. The over-under is 6. Ohio State comes in after sweeping Michigan State at home. Michigan had the U.S. National Under-18 team last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we say not a huge favorite, not a huge underdog. These are the biggest favorites and underdogs we have this week. At minus 165, Michigan's by far the biggest favorites. I mean, it's not even close after that. I guess we'll get to Minnesota, which is a little bit closer. But you're right. This was a weird week in terms of finding lines and picking some games to talk about. We talked to Steve Rollick earlier this week. I love the way they're playing right now. 135 plus 135. That's a fantastic value, even if you're on the road at Yost. And that is the one thing to couch is that Ohio State has not been a great road team this year. They've been fantastic at home, but road's been a struggle. So maybe, going into there, it feels like it's one of those series that you look at and you know it's going to be a split. Just which team's going to win on Friday night. That's the games we're talking about. So I still would, if I was betting on this, I'd go Ohio State over under 6, perfect number. We're going to see that number 6 come up way too many times this week. And after all my Frozen Fenway talk about over under and nearly hitting it all, you forget that empty net goals screw up your night really bad when you bet over unders. So I look at Ohio State. I love them this week.
By the way, I didn't even realize it was Friday the 13th. This shows you I don't know up from down. Like when Ed just said that, I was like, wait a second, he's right. He's absolutely right. This is why Ed gets paid the big bucks to host this thing. I'm with you, but I'm going to take Michigan because Ohio State has been so bad on the road. And not only that, but they've been bad. The only team I think they've beaten on the road on a Friday is Notre Dame, which isn't saying much, and I'll get to that in a little bit because Notre Dame loses to everyone on Friday nights. So I'm taking Michigan largely for all the reasons you just said. I think the over-under is a perfect number, and I think this is probably going to hit. I think this is going to be a push. Like I just don't even feel like this is going to be a like I said, just kind of lame line. I don't really know that there's a whole lot to dive into on it, just because I really don't. I'm not feeling it. Like it's not speaking to me here.
No, this game screams 4-2. I don't know why. It just feels like a 4-2.
3-2 with an empty netter that makes you absolutely whip your phone off the wall if you bet the under.
You still have a phone on the wall?
No, your cell phone. Like you see the empty net goal and your phone just becomes a weapon projectile. You go, what the actual boom, right off the wall. That's what you're doing.
I was picturing you tearing the wall phone off the wall in the kitchen.
I would say a door.
And I'm thinking, what century
it's a door.
Are you in?
It's a door. If I had the under and the empty net goal made it 4-2 and you hit the push and you don't win any money off it, I suppose it'd be worse if it were 5.5 and you lost on it. But I would absolutely just go ham nuts on a door.
Boston College, UMass, Fenway, 5.5 over under 3-2, 8. And BC had 5 shots in close, either missed the net or they were all blocked. And then a puck ends up at the point, has to go through 7 bodies and somehow goes in the net. 8 seconds left, 4-2 final.
Oh yeah, someone threw a phone that day.
It wasn't me. I didn't bet it, but I had given out the advice, and I hate giving advice and having it not come true.
Well, there you go. We don't have enough of a sample size this season, and I realize different seasons, some different players, different head coach. But Michigan was not great at home on Friday nights last season.
Which is not lost on me. I know it's a different coach. I know that there's, a lot of different bodies in the lineup, but sometimes it's just getting up for that first game. And now they've been 2 weeks off. Technically, I know they played the national team development program, but they haven't played an NCAA game in well over a month. So this is getting the training wheels off, and playing an opponent that in a game that means something. I think it's a more difficult situation for Michigan. I with the line, I love Ohio State. Without the line, I like Michigan. How's that?
There you go. That's fair enough. And so if you were putting money on a game this weekend, would you guys even bet this game?
Yes.
This would be the first one I bet.
Bet the dog?
Out of the 5, I'd bet the dog, yeah.
And I bet the favorite.
That's because Dan doesn't really like money. He just likes to give his money away.
Says you. Air Force lost last week. As expected.
All right. So next game on the list, Providence -110 and Merrimack -120. They're both an over-under of 6. Providence tied Army in their last outing. Merrimack last weekend tied Yale 3-3 and then got beat 6-2 by Brown. Dan, you can tell us about Brown.
I am betting Brown in this game. Who am I betting between Merrimack and Providence? Brown University, the 2-0 between the two teams.
Yeah, that's right. They won the Mayor's Cup too. They're against Providence, but Providence and Merrimack, especially Merrimack, and they didn't help the overall pairwise situation for Hockey East, which is plummeting. So I don't want to say these teams are limping into it because Providence has had some recent success, but Merrimack maybe coming off of cloud 9 down to about cloud 6. I mean, what do you see in this matchup, guys?
Well, Merrimack is a concern for me because they really haven't done anything out of the break. I don't know if there's more underlying issues. Haven't talked to Scotty Borick on this one. Did talk to Nate Lehman this week, and his team's banged up. They do get Yaroslav Hemelesh back from World Juniors. That's a big addition back to their lineup after he just won the silver medal with Czechia. But I kind of look at this as two teams that really limp into this game. I know Providence went up a day early. They actually left this afternoon. So, and I say that this is Thursday when we're recording this. So they're up there. I think that helps that you're not going through Friday traffic and sitting on a bus and worrying about bus legs. I think that, Merrimack's a fantastic team. They've been really good at home most of this year. Not that Brown game, obviously going down 6-1. Providence, I think they've got to be hungry. Both of these teams should be hungry. It should be a desperation mode, really, for both of these teams. These are teams that are, in or above the pairwise bubble, and they've got to find a way to keep themselves, solidify themselves better in the national picture. So this really does become a pretty big game for these two clubs.
Yeah, this game's sneaky huge. I mean, Merrimack, if we'd have come back I remember a couple weeks ago when Merrimack was, I think, 3rd in the pairwise at one point, or pretty close to it, and everyone was sitting here going, boy, how about Merrimack? They're cruising along, and difference in a month has been a really big slap. I mean, I know Yale and Brown are not those losing those games. And when I say losing them, they weren't wins, and anything other than a win there was going to tumble Merrimack. And the loss to Brown being, I think, 57th at that point or 56th in the pairwise. They were both under 50. Killed their pairwise, and Providence has had its problems too. So I think this is just not an easy one to pick. But outside of the injuries, and being a banged up team, there's something about Providence that if you were to put these two teams side by side and you were to say, which team do you trust to rally against the odds? You'd say Providence. And that's largely because Merrimack doesn't have the body of work yet. And over the long term, I mean, whether there have been a great story this year or not. So I'm picking Providence here because, like I said, both these teams are fighting different things. And also the head-to-head, the 6-1 win that Providence had over Merrimack. I know they lost 3-2 back in December, but that 6-1 win is enough to make me look at this and say there's something fishy there.
I hear great things about the band at Merrimack. Any implications from that?
No. No. It's great. It'd be great if it was, though.
That's a couple of big in-conference matchups. We've got 3 more to go. We'll look at those in a moment. USCHO Edge is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
Welcome back to USCHO Edge. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Minnesota, atop the Big Ten standings, is minus 150 at Notre Dame, an over-under of 6. Minnesota comes into this after a split last weekend, 3-0 loss at St. Cloud, a 2-1 overtime win at home against the Huskies. They're up by 8 points in the standings. They could open up a huge gap this weekend. Meanwhile, Notre Dame lags 15 points behind first place. What do you see in this one?
Well, Notre Dame certainly needs these games. They want more. They want to solidify their position in the pairwise. That's a big part. They need to move up in the Big Ten standings. That's another big part. I know you mentioned Friday's not the best for Notre Dame. They're 4-6 this year on Friday. So I just want to be somewhat fair. Not as bad as I probably thought they were. And I know that you kind of instinctually say, oh, they lose the first game of every season. They're not that bad. I do think that this is a huge challenge for them, though. Minnesota is just not a good team. This is a really good team. And I don't know that Notre Dame has played a team this good this year. Obviously, they played Minnesota and they got outscored 7-1 in those 2 games. Those games were on the road. These games were at home. I like Minnesota here, even coming off a split last weekend where they had to really find the way to get that OT win on Saturday. That's a good St. Cloud team. They were playing better than Notre Dame, in my opinion. Over under 6. I don't know. I wouldn't touch that one with a 10-foot pole because I feel like this one's going to go under. I feel like it's going to be 2-1, 3-1, something like that. I don't see this being 3-2 empty net goal to spoil your night and ruin a cell phone. But Dan, what do you think here?
I'm very much in Minnesota's camp here. And you mentioned the St. Cloud game. I'm actually going to go back to the Bemidji game. They were down 1-0 in the first period. Then that lasted all about a minute and a half for Minnesota. Got the power play, scored the goal, tied it up, and then won it with a minute 10, I think, or so left in the game. That game, to me, I mean, it was on the road, and it was against a sneaky good Bemidji team that I know I'm pretty high on. That was a game that when that happened, I was like, okay, this Minnesota team is going to be a problem. They're not I wouldn't look at them and say they're the best team in the country. I wouldn't look at them and say they're the best team playing around a win station, an elite conversation as well. But even if the way the pairwise shakes down, the way the rest of the season shakes down, they just seem to be a team that even if they lose a game here and there, which I mean, they've only got 5 losses on the year, 6 losses on the year. They are a team that can beat anybody. And while Notre Dame has been good at home, the 4-6 on Friday nights, like I said, feels worse than it is. And I know I cracked that joke, but they are a team that we can't look at right now and say, well, they can go out and beat anybody. They're a team that can go out and lose to anybody. I mean, that's what they showed last week against Wisconsin. So with all of that said, I think Notre Dame's better than what they indicate. I said that last week. I'll say it again. I just think that the capability of going out and losing a game right now is so much worse than what Minnesota brings to the table, which is not a knock against Notre Dame. It is very much a compliment to Minnesota. So take the Gophers. Now that all of that said, I'm with you. I wouldn't touch this over under. I mean, even if you dropped it a half a point, made it 5.5, I wouldn't touch it. I want no part of this.
Lay the money on the money line. That's the easier place here. Over under, not a good one.
No.
But if you do, I really advise the under.
Well, let's turn to Western Michigan at North Dakota. This one's a little closer than I would have expected, even though the Fighting Hawks are at home. Minus 105 for Western Michigan, minus 125 for North Dakota. The over-under 6.5, not too surprising considering that North Dakota's goaltending has been a little suspect and Western Michigan scores like crazy.
I mean, am I the only one that just every year of late, I start out high on North Dakota, watch them fade, and then get amazed when they're right back there. They're right back in it. I mean,
no, I'm with you. I think exactly. They're like Notre Dame football.
Here they are again, right there in the midst, in the pairwise. They're above the bubble right now. This is a team that, took 5 of 6 points from Western Michigan the last time they played on the road. That was a pretty big series, to get a 2-2 tie, a shootout win, and then get a 3-0 shutout the next night. Those were 2 really big games that closed out their first half. Now they've come back and they played the national team development program. Don't worry about that. But then they found ways to win against Lindenwood. Fine. I don't look at those and say, hey, big wins. They're just wins. They're wins in games you had to win. Fine. Now you're back into the men's league, and now you're trying to play this opponent that can be a tough opponent, Western. But I don't know. There's something about North Dakota. Now I feel like I have to open my eyes and say, hey, could they win this series? Could they sweep this series? Yeah, possibly. They've taken 5 of 6 already. Why can't they do that again? Why can't they make it 6 of 6? I think this is a tough road series for Western. I know that there's been great signs out of this team at times this season. They have been a fantastic season, but they've had a week off, almost a week and a half off. More than that, 2 weeks off since they played in the GLI and won the GLI and did so in a dominating way. They scored a lot of goals, but will that last? I don't know. Now it has to translate back to league play, because league play has been a little bit more difficult for Western than the non-league games.
I'm going to go the opposite way here. And although I agree with you 100% about I am on board with North Dakota. Like by the end of this year, they're gonna get in as either a 3 or a 4 seed, and they're going to be a team that's going to cause some problems for someone. Whether it's even if they lose the first game of the tournament, to me, they're still going to cause some problems and take a little bit more than what you think out of a 3 seed would, or a 4 seed. Now, all of that said, I'm not there yet on North Dakota. I'm still waiting. The Lindenwood games, I know that we don't chalk them up because they were, kind of throwaway in our mind, where they went out and they won the game. They found ways to win. Lindenwood is actually very sneaky decent, because they've managed in a short time with the transfer portal, and the way we could do a whole podcast on that. We're seeing that they're sneaky good. I mean, I've seen them in person. But what I would say is that the results before the holidays for Western Michigan were, for me, a team that needed to hit the brake. They did not play well against Omaha. They did not play particularly great against North Dakota, especially in the 3-0 loss. They needed to get to break. For whatever reason, I didn't watch those games, admittedly, but when I look at the results and I look at the box scores and I kind of do some homework leading into this, I felt like it came at the right time for them. They come out, they get that Great Lakes Invitational, and that's a way for them to kind of wake up, and they woke up in a big way. So for me, believing in Western the way that I do, assuming that they are, quote, back, if you'll give it that, I take Western, at least for the split, and I think on the first night they'll get it. I do really think they'll get it on the first night. I would say over under 6.5 is, boy, that's a tough over. If this were 6, I'd take the over. If this were 5.5, I'd bet my brains out with my Monopoly money on the over. 6.5 is just such a, you got to get so many goals out of this, and I think they can do it. Ed mentioned North Dakota's goaltending and the Western offense. I think they can do it, but I'm not confident in it. So I take the over with zero confidence whatsoever. Let's
look at the last time they played was only a month ago. 4 goals in 1 game, 3 goals together. They barely got 7 in 2 games. So that over under. I know that the bookmakers and the odds makers out there are really thinking about the 16 goals that Western scored a couple of weeks ago. They're not thinking about the fact that these two teams played really low scoring games literally just a little more than a month ago.
Right. It's all in how you view those games a month ago. Is Western more indicative of the 16 goals, or are they more indicative of the of that weekend? And if I'm sitting here preaching saying, well, they're back, and that's more of an indication than I say the over. But I'm also saying they're back with not as much confidence as I think I'd like to be saying it.
One other thing to throw in there, Cameron Rowe has been really good in net for the last 3-4 weekends for Western Michigan. His numbers over that time way higher than the sub 900 he has for the season. So that may impact it. But like we're talking about, close to 4.5 a game for Western Michigan, still close to 3.5 a game for North Dakota. So you add those up and you get 8. Maybe that's part of the over. But you do make a good point about last time they matched up. Where North Dakota is in the pairwise is pretty interesting. Of course, the sweep against Lindenwood got them back over 500. They're sub 500 in the NCHC and still are in a good position, which just shows you how strong that league is overall.
I think that's you can't forget that is that the fact that the NCHC has slid up into that second position overall in terms of the 6 conferences out of conference winning percentage. They've been strong since the break, and that's a big part. Going back to just games, I think there sometimes as a goaltender you just have some clunkers in there, and you look at games like the Nebraska Omaha, 7 goals allowed by Western. Michigan, 6 goals allowed, 5 goals allowed. So there's been some big numbers in there, but there's also been a lot of 1s and 2s and 0s. I do think that this Western team, their team defense is better than maybe some of these scores represent. That's what we saw at the GLI.
Last one in this episode, Minnesota Duluth -110 at Omaha -120. Minnesota Duluth has had a lot of injuries and a shortened roster. Omaha has been hard to figure out. They've been back and forth, up and down this season. Oh, and the over-under is 5.5.
Yeah, low scoring over under for me. That one kind of stands out a little bit. I'm having a hard time figuring out Omaha this year. I understand when a team's banged up, like Scotty Sandlin's team is. Omaha, they've had some real highs, they've had some real lows this season. I think that they're probably a better team than anybody wants to give them credit for. When you look at the standings, they're kind of middle of the pack. You look for pairwise, they're down below. They're one of the few teams in the NCHC that's down 25 or lower. But all you have to do in the NCHC is sweep a couple of weekends and you go from 25 to 13 in the pairwise. That's just the nature of the beast. The teams that you're sweeping are the ones that you're going to end up swapping positions with, likely. I like this series. This is actually a pretty exciting series, I think. I think there could be a lot of goals scored. If either team, I don't think either team has shown that they're, elite in terms of just burying pucks in the net, but I don't think either one has shown that they're elite goaltending and defense. I know Omaha has been a better defensive team probably than Duluth, but again, injuries factor in. I don't know the health level of Minnesota Duluth right now. That's one of the things as I'm looking at this. I don't have that inside scoop to know if they're getting some guys back. They need some bodies. They needed some bodies through November and December. So this one's a tough one for me to handicap. I think if push comes to shove, I'd probably end up taking Duluth.
Yeah, I had such a hard time handicapping this one. I literally picked my head up over my laptop, looked at my wife and said, who you got? Like that was, I couldn't figure it out. Her rationale, by the way, for taking Minnesota Duluth is Omaha, Peyton Manning. I'm a Patriots fan. I'm taking Duluth. So there you go. There's your gambling advice for the week. That's it.
But somehow we pay this man to be on a podcast talking about gambling.
I'm like sitting here and I'm like, I just can't. I don't know who to pick. I think I flipped a coin. I legitimately think I flipped a coin for myself, and because all the reasons that you said, there's so many things when you're like, all right, look for an edge. Where's the edge in Omaha? Well, they've been pretty lousy since the beginning of December, for lack of a better term. I know they only played 2 series, but the sweep against Colorado College, they lost to St. Lawrence in overtime at home. That's not great. All right, well. They were better than they were earlier in the year when they lost to Niagara twice and, lost to Fairbanks and all that. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, well, what about Minnesota Duluth? They've been better as of late, but All right. They lost twice to Denver, but hey, they took them to overtime. That's pretty good. There's just so many pluses and negatives when you go down these teams. Hey, they lost to Western. I'm even scrolling through right now, reminding myself, hey, they beat Omaha. They lost to Western, but they beat Western. Like that makes me not confident in any of these picks. So, I mean, I took Duluth. It was one of those. It could go either way. It really could.
One of the things that you're bringing up is it's harder to find data on who's injured with college teams as opposed to the National Hockey League. This time of year, everybody's playing hurt. There are players by the end of the season who are going to get surgery as soon as the last game is done. But if you can find out enough information on who is hurt and who's not, that may make a difference. If you're a team right now with maybe only one or two players out or maybe no players out of the lineup for injuries, you might have a bit of an edge there over somebody who's quite a bit ill or injured along the way at this point in the season.
Yeah, I mean, this is still a gambling podcast, so I'll kind of look at this from the gambling line. And you have such a bigger advantage when you're making bets if you can wait until about 30 minutes to 40 minutes before the game. Hopefully the teams have posted their line charts. You can see who's in, who's out. That really makes a difference. I mean, when you're looking at a team that has, 4 forwards missing or 3 of the defensemen missing, if you don't know that on Thursday and you're placing a bet, you might as well be going in with no information. It's much better to try to wait for that information. Usually it seems most schools these days are pretty good about posting lines, especially in the bigger leagues. If it's not the school, it's the media, it's somebody that covers the team. So when you're looking for some edges out there, make sure that you're trying to put, this, not everybody can do it because sometimes you're going across the border to make bets. Sometimes you can do it on an app. Sometimes you can't do it on an app. But I'd say I always think that, those people that put bets in on Wednesday for a college hockey series or really any sports series, I feel like pro sports, maybe you have a little bit more information. But if you're putting bets in on Wednesday for a Friday game, you're probably allowing the edge to leave what you have. You need to kind of wait and be patient.
Yeah, the injury conversation is always so interesting because you also don't know if a guy plays and he's hurt or he's in the lineup. Is he at his best self? Like
right.
I mean,
and there's nothing you can do with that.
Right. And exactly. And when you're looking at the lines, you obviously don't have the coach's knowledge to say, hey, I'm going to skate this guy. Yeah, we're going to list them together as the second line. We'll see how he goes. They chop it up as they go. It's all part of trying to game it out. And it's just so hard when you don't have, the eyes and ears. But you're right. If you can wait 30 minutes, wait in the parking lot of when you cross the border to go into a different state, which, by the way, the amount of people who do that I'll never get over it. Like they literally drive across and like wait in a mall parking lot for the app to pick up and then do it. And it's the most amazing thing on the planet. But that's another.
As somebody who lives in Massachusetts where sports gaming is still not legal,
correct.
You do too.
Yeah.
If you go up to New Hampshire on an NFL Sunday,
Rockingham.
right around 12:55, the traffic really picks up coming back across
the best is at like 10:30. If you look at a Dunkin' Donuts in Rockingham, New Hampshire, exit 1, whatever it used to be, when you cross the border, there are people just like packed into a Dunks and they're like just waiting because they know they gotta cross the border, then they place their bets and they turn around. It's honestly the best. But I mean, back to the injury thing, it's tough. And that's all this information that you have to go with. And if you feel confident in a team system versus another and the guy's executing it, then you can make the bet early. I wouldn't, but that's why I'm not doing this anyway. That's why I'm not putting money down on some of this stuff anyway. And by some, I mean all.
A podcast of 3 guys.
Yeah.
3 guys talking gambling and none of us actually gamble.
I know.
on college hockey.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably best with our involvement in the sport, even just as journalists and broadcasters, that we don't. But it's fun to talk about them and consider what we might do if we did. And we're going to wrap it there. USCHO Edge is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcasts at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Edge.